John Brockman. John Brockman is a long-time friend of DLD, a special one. He's also the most critical friend of John. He is the one who is sometimes angry about the noise, about the not working of the technology, of talking this marketing things which she doesn't like. I accept his critics. John is one of the best agents of change. He changed the intellectual landscape of Europe, of America, in combining scientists with intellectuals. John, the floor is to you.
Thank you, Steffi and Hubert. Another wonderful event. Congratulations. In the year 2000, the Edge website published The Second Coming, a manifesto by David Gelernter, who is with us today. In it, David wrote, "Everything is up for grabs. Everything will change. There is a magnificent sweep of intellectual landscape in front of us." That was 10 years ago. This year, Edge ran its annual question, which was published 2 weeks ago, which is, how is the internet changing the way you think? The question was somewhat inspired by a piece we ran on an interview with Frank Schirrmacher, who is sitting with us. It was called The Age of the Informavore, and which he defines as the organism that consumes information. And he picked up a comment by George Dyson, who said, "Is the price of machines that think people who do not?" So people have been thinking deeply about the internet and the web that sits on top of it and the applications that are run on the web. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The panelists are Frank Schirrmacher, who is the co-publisher and editorial director of the feuilleton of Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung. David Gelernter is a professor at Yale. He's the Lord of the Cloud. In 1991, he presented, actually before that, but publicly, his ideas of cloud computing became public, and it was only this past year that Microsoft started running ads with Steve Ballmer as the cloud computing person. David is professor of computer science at Yale. He's the author of many brilliant books, among them Mirror Worlds. He subsequently has been writing about Judaism and social issues. He's also a painter, and he's more likely to be in his painting studio as he is in front of a computer. Andrian Kreye is the editorial director of the feuilleton of Süddeutsche Zeitung, a war correspondent who left Germany as a young man and traveled the world for his paper. Spent 20 years in Brooklyn, and during that time was a very early, actively present person in the digital revolution, covering the Well Computer Fair, the West Coast Computer Fair, probably the most deeply involved German I've met in terms of being present at the creation. So I would like to start with Frank. We can pick up with some of the ideas he presented in his Edge piece, which were based on another best-selling book by Frank called Payback. The piece was taken very seriously in America, and commenters were John Perry Barlow, Steven Pinker, Daniel Kahneman, Yevgeny Morozov, among many others. Frank?
Yes, let me just start with Edge, because very many of the ideas, at least I'm discussing, stem from Edge. The word Informavore actually goes back to Daniel Dennett, who wrote a book on the idea, on the concept of the Informavore, that means the human being that needs information more than it needs food. As we all know, information is not free. Information, and that's since Herb Simon said it years ago, information needs attention. It consumes attention and it is paid by attention. And a couple of years ago, Dennett, or a couple of months actually ago, Dennett said in the internet age, there is so much information that needs attention, but there are not enough brains to cope with this information. So the question is, how will be the relationship between the immense power and immense amount of information and the brain that has to somehow cope with the information? And if you look at it, it could be, and somehow the modern technology and the industry proves it, that we get kind of Darwinian structures in information itself. So that if you have too much of population and too few of food, of course only the one will survive who is the best in organizing the attention that is there. And as we know, this attention at this moment now and will be much more organized by machines, by algorithms. And the question I'm asking, and we discussed it on Edge too, the question I'm asking is this not one of the deepest changes in thought, that the question which idea will survive, which thought will survive in the information overloaded society is decided by machines and not by human beings anymore.
Oh my God.
Schirrmacher is a philosopher, and I look at things from a more concrete point of view. I think we're all justified in being enormously excited about what's going on the web, internet, and technology and communications in general. But it seems to me that we face the dangers we face, and we do face dangers, because it seems to me that the pace of innovation and the imaginativeness of innovation in the internet area and the web area are slowing down rather than speeding up. And I think the dangers we face are, first of all, complacency, and second, mystification. I mean, complacency has to do with the attitudes of users of technology. Technology has to be pushed forward in a top-down and a bottom-up way. So technologists, scientists, imaginative people, whatever their field, think up new ideas out of the blue, and eventually we embody them in technology, and that's great. But the field also has to be pushed by users who expect more from their machines than they are getting. And when you have a user community that is full of people who are as thrilled with their iPhones and Airbooks and laptops and so forth, and the web in general, as we have now, we are in danger of losing the user component of skepticism and dissatisfaction that pushes the web forward. After all, ultimately, what the web makes markets, not ideas. It's one of the most important markets it can make is the market in ideas. There's an interesting, and there's going to be a contradiction between those who look at the web and see the triumph of freedom, or at any rate freeness, not having to pay for what you get, and the fact that the ultimate value of the web is in competition. We don't want merely a million or a billion or a trillion ideas out there. We want them to compete so we know which are good, which ones are the ones that we need to spend our limited amount of attention on. And it seems to me that the web's mechanism, without getting into many more concrete details, the web's mechanism for supporting a free market of ideas, a free market in ideas does not yet exist in satisfactory form. We can see beginnings of it in some of the real-time streams and feeds that are all over social networking sites, like Friend Feed and Facebook events, and a bunch of other things generically called live streaming, and in Twitter. But they're not there yet. If the web were such, if the web is such a marvelous tool for supporting free market of ideas and a free global conversation, what are we all doing in Munich? We would be sitting at home logged on, and the fact, chatting through our machines, and the fact that we are, and I think means two things. First of all, the software is not mature enough. The software is not there to support a meeting like this, either with everybody in the room simultaneously or an ongoing asynchronous type meeting where people drop in and out. The software is not there to support it in the way we like. And second of all, even if it were there, we'd still be in Munich. In the final analysis, we may all be Informavores, but we seek out each other much more than we seek out information. Just as we need food, clothing, shelter, energy a lot more than we need information, despite what Dennett says, for whom I have the greatest possible respect. So I think what we need, I think what we need most at this tremendously exciting and tremendously hopeful time is since we are unlikely to see a more judicious technology world, we need more skepticism on the part of the user community.
I think we're right now at an interesting verge of evolution in computer technology, not only but in computer use, because my first encounters with the internet were very much offline, which was interesting. It was like in the late 80s, and I still had a computer where I would print out my texts and fax them back to Germany. So I met Marvin Minsky in the late 80s at the MIT Media Lab, and back then he said, you know, we have now parallel processing computers, back then already, that are so powerful, no human mind will be able to program to really use their full ability. And he said, something that's a given now, he said, the really important thing about computers in the future will be what they are connected to and not how powerful they are. And I think we're a little bit on the verge now that it's not so important what the web can do and how powerful it is. It's going to be really important what the people do with it and how they use this tool. Because actually one of the greatest traits of the internet is it's become really boring. I mean, if you go on Twitter or if you go on Facebook, it's really boring, it's bland, it looks boring. But what you can do with it right now becomes really interesting, and that's not up to the internet or the people who create software or something like that. It is really what happens in the real world, and that's where the information overload in the market of ideas becomes also very challenging, because these ideas in this unbelievably vast market of ideas will have to prove themselves in the real world now, and that's, I think, what will make them valid ideas in this great marketplace of ideas.
When you say the internet is boring, you probably mean the web is boring.
Yes. I mean, it used to be so exciting because, I mean, I remember the time there was a modem, and then we were on a store in Africa, and we would have to disassemble like some phone jack and like dial into a node in Paris to like get some information from wherever, and it was all really exciting. And then building your first website and starting blogging, and that's all a given now. It's not something you think about anymore. It's like getting into a car. You don't think about that you have to build the transmission or have to know how the engine works. You get into the car, you start to drive, and that's where the web is now, and that's where it becomes really interesting, because now you can think about where you drive.
We're not talking about toaster ovens here. This is like evaluating an appliance. The internet is a much deeper idea. It's based on the cybernetic idea, which is about new ways, new patterns of connecting, a non-linear relationship between input and output, and where A doesn't go to B, but they exist simultaneously, and there's no time. It's a different universe which we're all part of, and we're all twittering or emailing, but something a lot deeper has happened in the last 20, 30 years.
And I totally agree that web. That's John. Sorry, I totally agree that, of course, in every market of ideas, but that's not the question. The question is this market following new power structures, or is it a market, as some people still believe, which is very democratic, where every thought, because normally you think thoughts convince because they are very convincing, or ideas convince because they are very convincing, and because your argument is very good. That was the old notion. The new notion could be that this market of ideas is following power structures, and these power structures are algorithms, or they are machine code, or whatsoever. As you see, PageRank is one of the most famous examples, but there will others be there in the near future. So, because I can't cope with all the information, I need help. And the question is this help? Is this the idea? Is this idea good? Is this idea bad? Will this survive only, or have a breakthrough only because it's following certain power structures, which then might be, of course, new media companies or whatsoever. But it's not the concept of free. And for me, one of the interesting points was, we all know, I must say, we all know that the financial crisis, of course, had to do very much with human beings. It had to do with greed and also whatsoever. But when Alan Greenspan testified before the American Congress, he had an interesting speech, because he claimed, without explaining it, that they had two authorities they were following in there, because they were asked, why did you do this? Didn't you have the real information, what was happening? And he was quoting two authorities. The one was Nobel Prize winners. He said, we listen to Nobel Prize winners, and the other was, we listen to computers. And that in the 21st century, it's very easy to say you have this an identity between Nobel Prize winners and computers as authorities, is very telling for the competition of ideas in the near future.
Isn't it the case, though, when you look at things from the point of view of a newspaper editor and publisher, the overflow of ideas developed rather continuously over the last 100 years, from the I think the rise of newswires in the 1930s, also in the 1930s, international radio hookups, and generally a huge amount of radio traffic, amateur radio traffic. And when you had a bunch of news services, not just a few as they are today, you were in a newspaper office with a lot of live feeds, the average person couldn't consume all those news services, and we needed to rely on Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung or some other editorial board we trusted to say, you're not a professional news reader, we have to tell you what's important, you better trust us. And it seems to me that that role, as you say, information is more out of control on the web than it ever has been before. And the power structures we need, if you want to call them that, are going to look a lot like newspapers and publishers and networks, exactly the sort of thing that we have today. And I assume in many cases will be the same people.
You see, I know this argument very well, that people say, well, he is obsessed with this question because he's working in old media, he's working in a newspaper, and exactly the same argument you just used. But I'm not convinced, because I think there is a difference, because I take, in a way, a very serious the new concepts. And I'm saying, you're right, there was an information overflow, which was actually an overflow which evolved in institutions. Now we have an information overflow which is evolving in individuals. And so what I have to do now is to listen to individuals. And the question is, of course, impossible to listen to all the individuals in the world. If I take the concept very real, I would have to say, it might be that now, not here in Munich, but somewhere in Yale or in Harvard or wherever, there is a tweet or there is a feed or whatsoever where somebody has an incredible idea, and I would love to know this idea. And this is the new situation. And so I need filters somehow to of course, to have access to these ideas. And these filters, of course, will be technical filters. But in a world where the institutions, and there will be very flat, who produce news, this means we are dependent, and we should face this, we are dependent in the selection of information from machines that determine the new market of ideas.
But will an algorithm ever be able to create context or understanding? Or just like levels and hierarchies of information?
But that's happening all the time. The answer to the information overload from Google, as far as I understand it, is to say, at least that's what Eric Schmidt told me, is to say, in the real-time internet, we will have the overflow, so what will we have to do? We will have to evolve predictive search. And if you have, of course, in the real-time internet, you have to somehow to cope with the future. And predictive search, for example, is an example where the algorithms somehow determine content. We saw it with the financial crisis as well.
But for me as a consumer, predictive search, I think is the problem that the machine will start to learn who I am, but I'm so limited. I want the machine to tell me more than just what, like, you know, the easiest one is the Amazon engine, that they start to learn what I'm interested in, what I know, and what I want. And now they're going to give me what I want and what I know, but I want more of that. And I think, can an algorithm go that far that it can give me more of that? Or do I need still human beings to tell me that?
Can an algorithm do that at all? I mean, when you talk about predictive search, I think that is too shallow a solution for the problem that you yourself are bringing up. I mean, you're bringing up the problem of important ideas evolving somewhere that don't get recognition. And the question is, how do we succeed in recognizing the brilliant ideas? And this is a historical problem. It's 1800 and William Blake is painting and writing poems in London and nobody's paying attention because they think he's an idiot. And he's slightly strange and he's got the wrong friends. Or Einstein is working in the Swiss Patent Office, or Giacometti is working in a little studio in Paris. People are not paying attention. Now, how do we recognize, how do we succeed in recognizing in time the greatness of Blake or Einstein or Giacometti? Not by algorithm, because ultimately, I think ultimately the ideas that we care about in recognizing Einstein, there's no algorithm that will tell us, all your old algorithms are wrong. Here's a completely new worldview. To recognize a fundamentally different Weltanschauung, something that I don't know how to build an algorithm to do, but still less to recognize the great artist, the great poet, the great painter, a great contributor to the spiritual, aesthetic, moral, intellectual stock of ideas. Human beings need to recognize that, and they could if software made it easy instead of
software lets us be exactly the way we were for the last 2,000 years, with your idea of what's great and what's authoritative, what's important. My response to the business of the newspapers arbitrating what people think about is that no one is going to be a newspaper person if they don't know what an algorithm is, if they don't know how to sit down and navigate this new universe. Which means it's not an age thing, it's an attitude thing, that most of the people are finished. It's over. And the whole idea of the great man is over. And in some sense, you are over. Well, you're a genius, acknowledged by all of our friends, and Dave and I are very good friends. But to think that this revolution has no effect on these euphemisms of art and greatness, like nothing's changed.
It will have an incredible impact. It will change everything. It's not an argument against web or internet or whatsoever. It's only taking it serious. The revolution will be much wider, much more intense than you think. It's now starting to affect all the other fields. Media is only the beginning. Everybody's talking about media, but media is just a little part of this revolution. And when you say, of course, I want to know much more about the future, I don't only want to know what the algorithm is giving to me. There are many people who only want to know very little about the future, for example, about you. They want to predict you. They want to predict you on your working place. They want to predict you in crime and whatsoever. And this is true for art, this is true for literature as well. We will have changes that will, if you take it serious, of course, change the idea of this one original thinker who sits and has a concept and has an idea. They will still exist, but they won't play the role anymore.
But after all, the technology we have now is a result of particular ideas of thinkers who sat down. It's Doug Engelbart in 1960s Palo Alto, who says we should have windows on the screen, we should have something like a mouse. It's Alan Kay at Xerox PARC and his colleagues who say, well, now we should have overlapping windows and a desktop type thing. It's the engineers who developed the Macintosh who said, well, we can make it a little better, we can make it cheaper. There are particular people, as you know, clearly, who develop.
It's you too.
Who developed the browser, who developed the web. I mean, these are not ideas that just appeared out of the ether. You know, we can point to the people who did them. In some cases, they are obscure and should not be. Not very many people know who Engelbart is, or even Alan Kay. But that doesn't change the fact that particular smart guys did it.
Okay, then I have a question, very concrete question. Information overload is something absolutely concrete. We were discussing this yesterday night. The one problem with information overload is that it is very hard to postpone things. That it's very hard to say, well, this email I will be reading it later, or this information is important, but I have to get this information later because I can't. It's very hard to get this time structure in the information. And I don't see any technology that actually does it in a very good sense. And your concept, as far as I understood it, is exactly that. It would say it's a stream of time, if I understood it in the right way, a stream of time where the information load, where you actually can postpone things into the future.
Yeah, clearly the user of the future, the user of now wants control over the texture of time, over his own future as well as his own past. And it was a property of the software, the simple live stream software that we developed in a research group a decade ago, more like 15 years ago, that everything you had in the world, every one of your digital assets, was on a single stream in the cloud. So I never worried about whether it was on my cell phone or laptop or desktop or somewhere else. I always knew exactly what it was. It was in this one stream. And the stream flowed at the speed of time. But it's often the case that things appear that I don't have time to deal with. As you said, I'm sitting around, I see an email, I've got to answer it, but I don't have time to answer it now because I'm on a panel or whatever. I want to take the email and copy it into the future so it comes back again in the evening when I can look at it, or I want to tell the system, keep showing this to me every evening, every morning until I deal with it. There's minimal control over time to take work items or tasks, messages, information of any sort that flows up to you in the present and copy it into the future so you get a second chance at it, is a simple attribute of stream software, of live streaming software. As I say, it was in our system in the 90s. But I think the industry is becoming more and more conservative. When the industry implemented live streaming ideas, so-called, based on these things, they used the simple idea of a stream in time, which is powerful, like an event stream. But they left out the simple copy-transpose operation. I think users should be more demanding. They shouldn't be so easily satisfied with friend feed. They should see the possibilities inherent in live streaming and say we need time management. I mean, this is when you say information overload. What I look at a tactical versus strategic level is managing my life not month by month, but hour by hour or minute by minute. Information hits me in real time. That's the management problem. It needs to be solved. The software is there to do it, but it's we're too happy. We're too pleased with what we have to want to see more.
Talk about the screenless computer we talked about yesterday.
I just had a quick question on the demanding consumer. Isn't it that the demanding consumers turn into the active consumer? Because if you look at Twitter, how Twitter evolved in the past year, I mean, it was consumers who came up with new ideas and new functions, or there's something like TweetDeck, which is not like run by, which is already kind of a rough, simple version of what you say. It's starting to integrate, it starts to like organize the stream, because I mean, depending on how you use it, I mean, Twitter can become very overwhelming, but also very useful. So you have people developing software by themselves. So maybe the demanding consumer is too passive, and the active consumer who actually gets into it and starts to mold it. And now technology is at the point where we can actually mold it without having to know programming. We can just like mold it to our needs.
I think that's absolutely true. You do see active consumers at sites like Twitter, at sites like Facebook, and many of the newer sites where active users reconfigure things, and they're doing programming, not in conventional programming languages, but using whatever stuff is available to them. But that doesn't go far enough, because if it did, when I turn on my computer, I wouldn't see a Windows desktop that was designed in 1974. I mean, Xerox designed this desktop, and it was an absolutely brilliant thing when it appeared. And Apple made some little refinements, but significant. And the Mac was a beautiful thing when it appeared. And that was in 1984. And if I were to take one of those 1984 Mac computers and put it in front of a Yale undergraduate today, or any student, he wouldn't even know it was a computer. You know, it was this little upright thing, a tiny screen. On the other hand, as soon as he turned it on, he'd see exactly what he's grown up with. He'd see the windows, he'd see the menus, he'd see the icons. Although that interface and that operating system was developed in an era where there was virtually no email, where the internet was brand new, where there was no web, where the user community was a small percentage of what it is now, where the whole world was different, where there were no cell phones, there were no wireless. But that's the operating system that comes with every machine you buy. And likewise, the idea that I should have one operating system environment on a desktop or laptop, and I buy a cell phone and I get a different one. I don't have time to learn two separate operating systems. I mean, there are two computers, a big computer and a little computer. And a well-designed modern operating system would look exactly the same on any electronic device with a screen, up to differences of function in the device itself. And these things are 1950s ideas. They could be applied with 1970s or 1980s technology. And although users can go far in making Twitter a more interesting site and uploading stuff at YouTube and doing millions into Facebook, they can't cause the integration among separate systems, the fundamental rethinking and rewriting that is the responsibility of the industry and academic computer science departments that they have failed to carry out because just as consumers are complacent, I think we in computer science are 10 times as complacent. We're thrilled with what we made. Everybody else seems to like it. So, but I'm in the minority. I haven't heard many others.
How about hearing from the audience? A few minutes for questions.
I think the question always is, what would be the alternative? So when we say that it's algorithms and not people, well, what's the alternative? So I think the problem of relevance, the problem of what to surface from the large world that's out there, that is, I think, a key problem. And just saying, well, we don't do it perfectly, shouldn't stop us from truly working on trying to get relevant stuff out. And that, of course, linking back to the previous panel, needs lots of data to understand what in a given context, in a given situation, is relevant to the person. So any thoughts about considering what's the alternative to what we have in this imperfect world which we're looking at right now?
I would say, is it working?
Yeah.
He was just saying the consumer. When you, 90th centuries now, you publish a newspaper. And it was very just every day. We didn't even talk about it. No one talks about it. You don't only, in the best way, you don't only talk about readers, but when you write an article and so on, you talk about people who think about it. You say, what will people think? What you want to do something with thinking. And so we are not talking about consumers in the internet or in the web, but we are talking about thinkers. We talk about people who think. And that's something very fundamental. It's not the thinking I have when I walk into a shop and I think, oh, shouldn't I buy this book or shouldn't I buy this car or whatever. It's thinking itself. These are people who, people in the net are people who are, for the first time I would say, there are many other things too, but they are as consumers, they are thinkers. And now there is the problem that, and that's a question of the alternative. The problem is that you have with this information overload, which you can't think, which you can't really, as I would always say, it's the problem of the future, which you can't cope with. And there is a sentence by you actually in the manifesto 10 years ago, which we published in our newspaper, where David wrote, "Computing transcends the computer. Computing is more than the computer." And that's the same with thinking. Thinking transcends the brain, or thinking transcends the newspaper, of course, or the books, or whatsoever. And that is why the question, what does it mean that a market for thoughts, a market for thinking, a market of the way how you find decisions is evolving in such a technological way is, I would say, the alternative in itself, to think about it, not to be too naive, to see that it is so fundamental, is one of the most important issues in the future. Because, when in all the discussions I have, people say, you actually said it, you said, well, it's like Gutenberg. They adopted to, it's the same, Gutenberg's revolution. Marianne Wolf just published a great book on the biology of reading, and she proved how the reading, the publishing, the language, the writing changed the brain. But I don't think that this is a right comparison. It would be a right comparison if you would see Gutenberg published books which you read, but which you could read yourself too. This is a new situation. And in this interaction, which is structured by your machines, by your inventions, it is absolutely decisive to see that there is definitely important a debate, which is not only the debate of the normal consumer behavior in the web, but about thinking behavior in the web.
I think our time is up. Correct. 5 minutes. So short questions, short answers.
I just wanted to add, because I mean, the interesting thing is maybe in technology people are consumers, but on the web people are users, and that's why they're called users, because the web is something enabling, and you can use it and you can like really reach out very far, which is a fundamental thing, truly, and interconnected. I mean, it already starts to see the architecture or the interconnected thinking, which is, and I don't want to go to the hive mind thing, but the collaborative aspect is like breathtaking.
Find it out tomorrow in the papers. Yes.
It seems like there was a philosophical debate earlier as to whether or not we're safer or we're more likely to have the great ideas be discovered when humans are filtering rather than, Mr. Schirrmacher, as you said, when machines or markets are filtering. But it seems that in practice, with the rise of self-publishing, both for literature and ideas and music, that frankly, I think today we have much lower risk of great ideas being filtered out. I mean, perfect examples are blogs that are coming out, very popular blogs that come out of, people who are not in a position typically to have access to, the senior publishers and things like that. So in practice, I don't think that's...
Thank you.
Except, maybe I'm not really well informed in the information, except certain music stuff, some blogs. Tell me one book, one great artist in the last 10 years who evolved like that. I mean, now we have 5 or 10 years, the new web. And so what would you say? Where is the you? Besides, except people who say everything should be free but publish their books for money. So where...
But I don't personally accept your exclusion. If I think of what I read and what I listen to, those blogs, those music, that's maybe more than half of what I'm consuming in terms of information. So I think to exclude those is really not fair.
If I could just add briefly to what Frank Schirrmacher said, it's widely said that the web has changed our way of thinking, improved our way of thinking, or added to our intellectual capacities, or brought about new ideas, new modes of thinking. And the question is, the web has been around for 15 years and has been reasonably mature for at least 5 years. If it's done that, where are the results? Where are the great new ideas that have emerged in science and technology, in art and music and literature and scholarship and history and politics that would not otherwise have emerged? I don't see. And for that matter, if this is the information age, what are we so well informed about? I mean, we're well informed about each other. We certainly know many more trivial facts about what we're all doing all the time than we used to. But there's a bigger question.
Well, I have to say, I mean, certainly information overload is quite a really big topic of our times. I totally agree with you, and I think it's great you picked up this discussion on the panel. But at the same time, I have to say, I could not disagree more with the overall attitude that I have heard now on the panel. I couldn't disagree more, really. This is not what I think about the web. You know, I mean, you say, Schirrmacher, you need help in managing all this information that you're reading. Get that help. It is out there. You know, there are people that can help you. And I mean, I'm not trying to be offensive or anything. I'm serious about this. If you don't know where to get help, I'd love to have a chat with you and go more into details. But you know, I mean, there are not only services, and I don't think the future is in algorithms. I think in the future role of the editor in the web will be even more important. It will be more important to curate content, you know, to have a very strong editorial, which will be human. Of course, there will be algorithms. I take it for granted, but I think there's much more to it. I think. And I mean, maybe you've heard of a group in English called Really Interesting Group, run by 3 brilliant people, thinkers and doers, Russell Davis, Ben Terrett, and Tom Taylor. And they've been producing this project called Newspaper Club. And 1 year ago, they made this newspaper. It's called Things Our Friends Have Written on the Internet. And what these people think about is basically stopping this kind of bridge or the gap between analog and digital, and sort of rather finding a bridge and bringing those two together. And I would really recommend everyone who's interested in this topic looking at what these people do. And I think this is the future, you know, where everything in the web is going, and sort of information management. That's just my 50 cents.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists.